that on now? There we go. Look at that. We got started a full minute ahead of time. Look at that. Before we get going into our class this morning, we have a couple of people that they need prayers. Harriet messaged me this morning and said that Merrill's really, really sick. He's been in the bed a couple of days sick, and so we're going to lift him up in a few seconds, and then also my cousin and Sarah's brother CJ. He was in a really bad four-wheeler accident, and right now he's got a broken left scapula, small punctures in his left lung, 2 broken ribs. He's got a broken shoulder and clavicle. And so that is a lot. And so he's going to have, I think that we know that he's going to have surgery probably at some point. They're just trying to figure out where, what, and when, and that kind of stuff. And so that's a lot, y'all. That was a blessing. So we're going to pray. Also, Miss Betty McMullen, she's at home and she's recovering from the health issues that she was going through as well. And so we're going to lift these 3 up this morning before we get going. So let's pray, please. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are happy, Lord, and we're grateful that we can come together this morning to open up and study another portion of your word. And we ask you, Lord, as we go into this study, Lord, that's going to really talk about being clean and being unclean, Lord, that we'll always strive to walk in the light as knowing that your Son's blood will continue to cleanse us, Lord. Help us to do the very best that we can to stay clean, Lord, spiritually. We ask you, Lord, to be with Merrill and, Lord, with the sickness that he's going through, that he can get to a doctor, Lord, and that they can prescribe him something that can help him, Lord, to get over the illness that he has. We ask you, Lord, to be with CJ. And, Lord, so many things that he has right now, and it's going to be a long recovery. And I just ask you, Lord, to be with the doctors. That will be to making the determinations and the decisions on how to best go forward with all the things that he's dealing with, and just give them the knowledge that they need, Lord. Just bless him in his recovery from these injuries, Lord. I ask you to continue to be with Miss Betty McMullen, and that her recovery will go smooth and be as painless as possible, Lord, and just continue to bless her. Lord, just guide us each day as you give us breath to be who you would call us to be and desire us to be, in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So this morning we're going to be covering a lot of material. And Leviticus chapters 11 through 15. Now, I'm not going to put you through the reading of all of that, but we are going to hit the highlights. And what you can do with this is broken down into each one, into each chapter and whatnot. So please take this as an opportunity to go from the time that we have together and then continue to study it during the week as we move forward. We only have about 2 more lessons in Leviticus, and we will be done with the book of Leviticus. I was talking to someone the other day, and we started this when I believe in March, at the very beginning of March. Oh, it's hard to believe we're almost at the end of May. Time goes by fast on it. And we'll be entering into Numbers very, very soon. And so with it, the whole idea of Leviticus chapters 11 through 15 is being clean and unclean. And what do you do about it? How do you stay clean? And so in Leviticus 11, we start to see foods that are permitted, that are forbidden, things that they could do, things they couldn't do. And we're going to break these down, and then we'll have some thoughts. So first, clean and unclean animals. The children of Israel could eat any animal which parted the hoof and chewed the cud. Leviticus 11 and verse 3. There was a distinction made between clean and unclean fish. In verses 9 through 12, God's people could eat any fish that had fins and scales. also clean and unclean fowl. Specific enumeration is given of the unclean fowl. Most of them are scavenger fowl and birds which eat flesh. I mean, you think about it. How many of y'all are going to go kill a buzzard and skin it and eat it? We'd have to be in a rough way, wouldn't we? Matter of fact, I can't remember what movie that was, but it's like one of those apocalyptic movies, you know what I mean? Like the world's going, something bad happened, and all of a sudden, it might have been the Book of Eli or something like that, where he just is listening, and all of a sudden he shoots up in the air and a buzzard drops, and I'm like, oh my goodness. If it's that bad, it's bad. Clean and unclean creeping things. Of the flying insects, the law forbade the eating of those except which had legs above their feet. Locusts were commonly eaten. So y'all like, I don't know. There's people still today. I lived in China for 2 years, y'all. They ain't a whole lot they throw off the menu. Okay, I'm telling you. Y'all, I walked into Walmart one day and I look over to the side and there's this big bowl of beetles. And they were roasted beetles. And they were still shaking in that pot. And people would just walk by and pick them up, fill up a bag of them, and they take them with them. You know, just some of y'all are like, why'd you tell me that? No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I have things I can do, and there's things I cannot do. And when there were some situations, if it was meat, it's better not to ask. I did make the mistake one time. I finally just got to the point, I said, listen here, does it fly? Does it swim? Does it run? And they just look at me, and I said, okay, it's not a person, right? No, it's not a person. Okay, then I'll eat it. Oh yeah. No, not our Walmart. No, not our Walmart. Big old butcher shop with geese and whatnot getting their heads cut off in the middle of Walmart. I was like, oh my goodness. There ain't no way that would fly in America. And I'll bet. Yeah, I'd have to take an F on that. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. Scorpions on pikes, everything. One of my students brought one of those to school, had a little scorpion on one of those little sticks, shish kebab sticks, and they just eat them like it's like nothing. And they're like, Mr. Carter, I will give you, I said, let me stop you there. There is not an amount of money. There's not an amount of money. So, let's see. I'm sorry. I done lost my place. Okay. Contact with a dead carcass of an unclean animal. Touching the carcass of a dead animal made one unclean until evening. If one carried a dead animal, he had to purify himself by washing his clothes, but still was unclean until evening. Unclean creeping things, things which crawl on their bellies, were unclean and made whosoever touched them unclean. Unclean vessels. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry? It was the time that was needed to be quote-unquote unclean. Unclean vessels, because these small creeping things such as a mouse sometimes have contact with cooking utensils. The law regulated that the vessels which touched an unclean creeping thing became unclean. Y'all know about that, right? Y'all see a mouse in the kitchen, you see him on a spoon, what y'all going to do? Oh, run. Y'all going to keep that spoon? Well, some of us guys are like, just wash it, it'll be fine. No. My mother-in-law was already like, no. The vessel had to be washed and left unused until evening. If it were an earthen vessel, it had to be destroyed because it could not be adequately cleansed since it would absorb fluids. If the deep creeping thing touched food and water, they became unclean. If the deep creeping thing was in a place of much water, the entire pit was not made unclean. The dead creeping thing did not make seed grain unclean unless water was on it. The water would soften the grain and allow it to absorb the fluids of the dead animal. Yes, yes. Yes. How many of y'all have heard about the black, what they would call different names, Black Death, Black Plague? Y'all heard about that? If you paid attention to world history, you know that was a devastating illness, right? And it took out, depending on where you were in Europe, some people, in some places, 75% of an entire city. And they said overall about 25 to 30% of the whole of Europe was killed by the Black Death or Black Plague. And what was interesting about that is the largest group of people that did not contract it were Jews. Now this made some people very suspicious because they're like, wait a minute, everybody else is dying, but y'all ain't dying. Why are y'all not dying? Well, look at what they had to follow. Their cleaning, the method of cleanliness that these people had. You think about what we heard here. The Black Death, a lot of people assume, and what's articulated is that it came from Asia with fleas. And those fleas got on rats. Those rats got on boats. Those boats went to Europe, where the rats came off the boats. And the fleas that were on the rats got on people and bit people, and therefore transmission of the disease. Now, the Jewish population there was so clean by the things that they had to live by here that they bypassed a lot of this stuff, a lot of these encounters with it. So their populations largely were not affected. And so you can imagine what the public looked at when they saw this. Probably, wait a minute, why is this not happening to y'all and us? Well, it must be something, some kind of voodoo or something like that. And it led to a lot of terrible issues for Jewish populations in these cities, just simply because they were clean people. I mean, you look at what we've read so far, the whole idea is to stay clean, right? Take steps if you're unclean, not just spiritually, but like physically. If your house is unclean because you got a mouse running around inside of it or something else, clean it up. Don't live in it, right? All right, Kurt, you had your hand up. Well, it means that it means that they were unclean. They had to stay away from the population. Yes. Yeah, until they did what they had to do to be clean again. Yes. That's exactly right. They couldn't touch other people. They had to stay away from people. It's not to the degree of leprosy, but you were still separated until you could become quote unquote clean again. And you think about that. How do you prevent the transmission of anything? Well, you take the person that's affected out of the pool, correct? And that's what you do. I'm sorry? Well, when they died, you know what? That's a good question. No, that's a really good question. That's a good question. Yes. Well, I know with the Nazarite vow that was something you had to stay away from anything, all that. But not everybody takes that vow. But that's a good question. That's a good question. I'll follow up with that question next week, because that is a good question. Yeah. That's right. It ain't hard. All right. Contact with a dead carcass of a clean animal. A person who came in contact with a clean beast which had died without having been slaughtered was unclean until the evening. If he ate of the dead animal or carried it, he had to wash and was unclean until evening. So, summary of this. In the closing section of the chapter, the Lord designated these laws as laws of holiness. He says here in Leviticus 11 and verse 44, "For I am the Lord your God, you shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and you shall be holy, for I am holy." The Israelites were to make distinction between clean and the unclean. And so, as a summary, these laws were given for sanitary reasons. The animals which were forbidden carried germs which threatened their health. Animals which were scavengers or survived through killing other animals could not be eaten. This idea of sanitation was because of their association with death. Those things considered by culture to be disgusting were forbidden. Most of the animals had been considered unclean as far back as the flood in Genesis 6 and verse 2. These were not new distinctions for Israel. And kind of like today, same thing with today. I'm pretty sure that what was considered to be the way Sophia would say ooh is still ooh today, correct? Yes. And so these regulations surely had the impact of distinguishing Israel from her neighbors, isolating her and protecting her from assimilation by the cultures around her. Same thing we just talked about a minute ago. In China, some things are more opened up as far as eating, where over here we'd be like, don't do that. This was another distinction between them and everybody else. And it paid dividends for them. It helped them out in a lot of ways, as far as what we were just talking about with the Black Plague. The regulations regarding clean and unclean foods emphasized the need for purity in approaching God, reminding Israelites that they were a holy people. All right? So he goes. So chapter 12, that's chapter 11. Chapter 12 opens up with talking about childbirth and purification after childbirth. A woman was considered unclean when she gave birth to a child. If she gave birth to a male child, she was in separation for 7 days. On the 8th day, the child was circumcised, and she continued in her blood of purifying for 33 more days. If she gave birth to a female, she was in her separation for 14 days, and then continued in the blood of her purifying for 66 days, twice as long as for the males. When her days of purification were complete, she offered sacrifices of burnt offering and sin offering, the law making allowances for the poor. So that was purification after childbirth. And then leprosy. Chapter 13, leprosy. This was a devastating one. Now, why do you think leprosy was so significant in dealing with? It's extremely contagious, right? And it's a horrible disease, correct? And is it one size fits all? Is everybody got the same, leprosy? You might have leprosy, but does it affect everybody the same exact way? Not the symptoms and the severity of it could be very different for different people. And so with it, there's almost 2 chapters here that deals with leprosy. Chapters 13 and 14, the disease known as leprosy was as dreaded in that society as cancer is in ours. The word leprosy was broad enough to include anything from cirrhosis to elephantiasis. I did not pronounce that the right way, so please don't give me credit for that. To leprosy. The descriptions of the disease are horrifying. The first symptom is a painless spot which covered an indolent ulcer. This ulcer may continue unprogressive for months or for years, during which the person affected is able to do his ordinary business, but at the end of these periods, whether longer or shorter, it produces a more repulsive and foul disfigurement of the human face and frame than any known disease. The features of the face changing their character, and part of the body occasionally mortifying and dropping off. Death at last comes suddenly when a vital part of the body has been affected. So, this was devastating, y'all. This was horrifying. This was a, you know, we think about the way we want to go out sometimes. Oh, I don't know, maybe. You know, you want it to be fast, don't you? You don't, I mean, the other thing, I think probably the best way is go to sleep and it happens when you sleep, right? You don't feel nothing. This was a very long. I just want to make sure that was. So I'm sure they would have done that from a distance. Is that good? That's good. From an applicable distance in which they could tell. And leprosy itself would be more of a interaction with the person themselves, not breathing onto you. Yeah, it's more about touch and feel. Yeah, in any kind of fluid exchange and whatnot. So I think we're good, y'all. I think we're back on. We apologize to our live audience that's out there. We had an issue with one of the speakers. I always feel like Garth Brooks when I put this thing on. I'm coming to you 1 second. I always feel like it's going to fall off my head. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Goodness. Elephantitis. Wow. Whew. I know, say that 3 times, right? Treatment of a leper. So how were lepers treated? The leper was required to tear his clothes, leave his head bare, put a covering over his lip, cry unclean, unclean when he met someone, and dwell alone outside the camp. The leprosy in garments, and we're going to make some points about this. The leprosy in garments refers to some kind of mildew or fungus. The garment suspected of being leprous was separated for 7 days to see if the leprosy had spread. If it had spread, the garment was burned. If it had not spread, the garment was washed and separated again for 7 days. If the color of the leprosy had not changed, even though it may not have spread, the garment was burned. If the color had changed, the affected part was torn out, and the rest of the garment could be used. So this was, even with the garments, this was taken very seriously. Now, you think about the person who had leprosy. Now, obviously, the physical parts of this are devastating, correct? They're devastating. You think about the emotional part of it. You got a family. You can't see them. You know, you got to stay away. You got kids. No more hugs, no more kisses. You know, you got to stay away. You think about how devastating this disease is. It wasn't just the physical toll of it, it was the emotional part of it as well. And what you were literally giving up, not just your health, but you were really just giving up your life. Now, you think about that, turn over to Matthew chapter 8. Now that we have the background of this, in Matthew chapter 8, and starting in verse 1, when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him, and behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Now you think about this guy, you know, that comes to Jesus. You know, some people you have different conversations with about various parts and different people that Jesus interacted with. Do you think that this leper was thought well of or by coming to Jesus? Do you think there were some people that was probably going to have an issue with him being unclean, going to this rabbi, to this Messiah? Do you think his very disciples had a problem with this? Yeah, I think initially they would have, because what's in their mind? It's going to spread. You're going to give it, you know, I mean, and you know, you got to get away from us, you know. You got to stay away. You can't, you know what you're supposed to do, and you're not doing it, right? You're supposed to stay away from everybody. You're supposed to do that, and yet you are not doing what you're supposed to do. And Jesus, what he says to this guy, Jesus doesn't shun him. Jesus goes to him. Notice that the scripture here says that Jesus put out his hand and touched him. Can you imagine the gasp from his disciples when he touches this guy? And we know that he heals him. Why did that leper take that kind of chance? Well, y'all, that's the only thing he had left. You think about the faith that it took for this guy. He believed what he heard about Jesus. This was his only, in his mind, this was his only opportunity to be clean. This was his only opportunity to be with his family, possibly, if he had a family, if he had kids. The only opportunity he had to have a life moving forward. He is a microcosm of us, in that Jesus Christ is the only one who can make us clean with God. And so when we look at leprosy, y'all, it was devastating. It was devastating. And you think about what impact this right here had on those who saw it. Do you think that I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, they were outside the camp, yes. That's right. That's right. But it was needed. Why? Because for the betterment of the whole, it was needed. No, they could not. They could not offer sacrifices because of their physical state, but sacrifices would be made for the whole. No, once you got it. I mean, I'm sure, well, I hate speaking in aggregate here, on the whole, that this never happens. Never use the word never, but more times than not, once you got it, that was it. I'm sorry? Well, just for the chance that maybe you're the one in a million that wins the lottery. I mean, maybe it. Well, but it is hope. Well, and for a lot it might have been, but it was still hope that you could still, I'm going to get re-examined in a certain amount of time, and maybe, just maybe. Well, it is. It is. And it's, we have situations today in our world where people get diagnosed with cancer and things of that nature. And it's what have we learned about this life, y'all? It's tough. These bodies, y'all, they're not made for eternity, are they? And we all are going to get something at some point, We all going to get something. Even Mr. Paul, 98 years old, still going. He's got his ailments too. Superman's got kryptonite. You know what I'm saying? There's kryptonite out there. All right. So what happens with purification of the leper? So there's two. The process of purification had two steps. Restoration to the fellowship of the community in chapter 14. When the priest found that the suspected leprosy was healed, he commanded the healed leper to bring 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. One of the birds was slain in running water over an earthen vessel, so that the blood from the bird might drain into the water in the vessel. The scarlet, cedar, hyssop, and live bird were then dipped into the bloody water, and the bloody water was sprinkled 7 times to him who had been cured from his leprosy. Then the live bird was freed. The healed leper then washed his clothes, shaved his head, and washed himself. The ceremony was performed outside the camp. Then the leper came into the camp, where he tarried outside his tent for 7 days. Then the restoration to the fellowship of God. On the 7th day of his tarrying outside his tent, he again shaved his entire body, hair, beard, eyebrows, washed himself, and washed his clothes. On the 8th day, he brought 2 male lambs without blemish, 1 ewe lamb of 1 year old, 3/10 deal of fine flour for a meal offering, and a log of oil. The priest who officiated presented the man that was to be made clean before the door of the tabernacle. He sacrificed 1 male lamb as a trespass offering, and the log of oil which he waved before the Lord. Some of the blood from the trespass offering was put on the tip of the right ear, upon the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot. Some of the oil was poured into the priest's left hand. The priest dipped the finger of the right hand in the oil and sprinkled it before the Lord. And then he put some of the oil on the same ear, thumb, and toe on which the blood was placed. The rest of the oil in the priest's hand was then poured on the head of the one being cleansed. The second male lamb was offered as a sin offering, and the ewe lamb for a burnt offering at the end of the service. And then he was clean. And so with it, there was those steps of purification. There were provisions for poverty there, that everyone would be able. Leprosy of houses. The leprosy of houses apparently is referring to the growth of some fungus in the house. I know some of y'all are just cringing at that thought. This is the first law given with specific application to the period after settling in Canaan. When leprosy broke out on the walls of the house, the priest commanded that everything be removed from the house. He looked at the symptoms. He shut up the house for 7 days and checked it for the spreading of the disease. If the disease had spread, they removed the stones in the walls which were affected, taking them to some unclean place outside the city. The house was then scraped and the dust removed from the house and taken outside the city in some unclean place of those removed, and were mortared and plastered. If the plague broke out again, the house was dismantled and removed from the city. Those who had gone into the house during the period were unclean until the evening. Those who had eaten or slept in the house had to wash themselves. They did not play. If the house was bad, they just did what? They took it out. If it, say what? They condemned it. They condemned it. Probably. I mean, you got to believe that stuff existed back then too, you know. And so you would take steps to want to make sure all that was gone. Let's see. All right. The same ceremony which was performed for restitution of the leper to the fellowship of the community was performed with reference to the house at the end of which the house was pronounced clean. So, uncleanness of secretions, chapter 15. Uncleanness caused by a running issue. The exact disease which is considered is unclear. Some have supposed it to be gonorrhea, involuntary bladder leakage, or mucus discharge from an infection. The disease made the man unclean. Everything he touched was unclean and had to be washed to be made clean. After the issue had stopped, the man waited 7 days, washed his clothes and bathed himself, and then brought 2 turtle doves or pigeons to the tabernacle for his cleansing. One was offered as a sin offering, and the other was a burnt offering. Uncleanness caused by the discharge of the seed of copulation. The first uncleanness of this category is caused by nocturnal emission. The man was required to wash himself, and then he would be clean at evening. Every garment which he touched had to be washed, and then would be clean at evening. A couple were made unclean by cohabitation, requiring that they bathe themselves with water for restitution to cleanness. Okay? No one's got any questions about that one, do they? Okay. Uncleanness caused by menstrual period. A woman was made unclean by the flow of her blood during the menstrual cycle. She was unclean for 7 days. Whoever and whatever she touched during this period was unclean. If a man had sexual relations with her during her menstrual period, he was unclean for 7 days as well. And then finally, uncleanness caused by an issue of blood. The uncleanness refers to an issue of blood which exceeds the menstrual cycle. The lady in Matthew 9, all of the days that she had the issue of blood, she was unclean. Everything and everyone she touched was unclean. These had to be washed in water and were unclean until evening. If and when her issue of blood ceased, she waited 7 days. On the 8th day she brought 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons to be sacrificed in the tabernacle, one a sin offering and the other a burnt offering. That's a lot, y'all. Surprised there's anything walking or flying or crawling around, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it says here that she was unclean for 7 days. So 7 days she's unclean regardless. And then whoever she touched during this period was unclean too. And if and it goes on to talk about that. So for anybody that she touched was unclean. Anybody. Well, you got to think this was a close-knit community. And so, like anything, like if in my neighborhood, right, I've got Uncle Gene in front of me, I got my dad beside me, I got Aunt Diane on the other side, I've got Sarah behind me, Uncle Melvin behind me. If something were to happen, somebody would get, one of our family members or closer, they would take care of the kids. And so I would say that the same thing. You would, your neighbor that, and it was a very close-knit community, so you would know people. You would have those people that you would have those relationships with. I'm sorry? Do they have servants? Not to the extent, I don't think so, no. I mean, I will look. I'll check into that one too. But my first thought on that is no. But I will look at that. That's exactly where I was about to go. No, you go ahead. That's right. And anyone, family members, friends, anybody, they had to stay completely away from her. Here's the other thing about that. If you want to see how deep Jesus loved people, when he heals her, he himself became what? Unclean. He was fine doing that to heal this woman, to teach us a lesson. And there's little things like that sometimes when we read it, we read over it, so to speak. And it had a deeper meaning. Here's a woman that had went through all of that solitude, y'all, all of that aloneness. And not only that, y'all, you can think of if she's walking, if they know that she's unclean, she's walking down the street, it wasn't just, you got to believe the way people are, that it wasn't just like, okay, how you doing today, I hope you have a great day, and walk away from her. You got to believe it was like, get away from me, woman, because if she touches me, what happens? I'm unclean. You keep that over there, Sometimes, y'all, people are not the nicest people in the world when it comes to their emotions and how they deal with other people. It's just what it is. I mean, you think about COVID and how people reacted with COVID, It's almost like you had the scarlet letter on, I mean, people can be extremely hurtful with some of this stuff. So, bless her. Yes. That is a good question. I'm telling you.